Welcome. You are about to enter a house of mirrors. In these 11 fables, you will not find the usual morality tales of clear heroes and villains. You will not be asked to choose a side. Instead, you are invited to bear witness to a simple, brutal truth. The longest-lasting cages we ever know are the ones we build for ourselves. Each of these men and women lived by a singular, unyielding truth. They did not die because they were flawed. They died because their identity, their greatest virtue, became their absolute master. These stories are a unified ledger of human folly. What is the pillar you lean on today? Is it strong enough to hold you up? Or is it simply waiting for the moment you trust it completely? Before it crushes you into oblivion? You are warned. Step forward. The earnest man lived his life by a simple, brutal truth: the hammer and the nail. He was the hammer, and the world was full of nails, waiting to be driven home. To him, there was no greater purpose than the honest grind, the steady, unrelenting work that built things, that put food on the table, that earned a man his rest. He had seen what a lack of work could do to a family, a community, a soul. He had seen men wither and die from idleness. So he worked. He worked to build, to protect, to conquer the fear of a world that could, and often did, take everything away. The years turned, and the hammer and nail built an empire, at least in a small way. Arthur's hands, once smooth, became a roadmap of calluses and scars. His back, once straight, carried the slight stoop of a man who had lifted more than his share. He bought the house with the big yard. He filled a bank account with zeros. But with every new acquisition, something was lost. His son's baseball games were a blur of after-the-fact stories told by a tired wife who attended them alone. Her laughter, once a vibrant melody in their home, became a quiet, distant hum, replaced by the silence of a house where a man was always a ghost. Physically present, but emotionally absent. On his final day, a Saturday, Arthur woke to a strange stillness. He had a rare day off, a concession to a lingering cold he couldn't shake. He found Sarah in the kitchen, unpaid bills on the counter. "I have to get to the DIY projects," he said. "The fence needs mending. And the porch swing. It's been a while." He looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time in what felt like years. A flicker of hope ignited in her eyes. "I can help," she said. They worked together, side by side, in a clumsy, unpracticed rhythm, as they were about to hang the porch swing. A simple, small task he had put off for a decade. He felt a sharp, crushing pain in his chest. His last breaths felt like years. The realization hit him with a force greater than the pain. He had built a fortress of security, but he had never laid the foundation. The hammer slipped from his grasp and clattered to the ground. Sarah's startled cry was the last sound he ever heard. The earnest man had worked himself to death, and the only thing he had to show for it was a life he never lived. Silas was born with a hole in his soul, a cavity where a child's innocence should have been. He and his mother had been beggars, a pariah in a world that saw them not as people, but as a stain to be scrubbed away. The mistreatment he endured didn't break him. It hardened him into something cold and impenetrable. He became jaded, a narcissist with a sociopathic streak that manifested as a deep-seated rage against anyone who didn't share his single-minded obsession to never, ever be poor again. Silas's cruelty was a finely honed art, and his masterpiece of destruction was a woman named Sophie. She was everything he was not: beautiful, luminous, sought after. He had been summarily rejected by her, a dismissal that fueled his twisted rage. He launched a smear campaign, a vile assault on her character and good nature. He delved into something darker. A spellwork to tap into her energy, her destiny, her spiritual rights. He sought to siphon away her luck, her opportunities, her prosperity, to steal every monetary blessing that was meant for her. And with the viral nature of social media, their falsehoods spread like a plague. Her world was systematically and cruelly dismantled. And Silas's fortune and influence grew with every piece of her shattered life. But just as Sophie was on the brink of being fully sucked into his darkness, a moment of clarity broke through the haze. She recognized the spell for what it was. And in a moment of desperate spiritual defiance, she invoked the elements to bring about the karmic justice Silas so desperately deserved. The tables turned. His meticulously collected fortune began to bleed away. The people he had coerced into his circle abandoned him as he grew weak and desperate. He died from a heart attack, alone in his empty mansion. In his final moments, he wasn't surrounded by the cold comfort of his wealth, but by a swirling vortex of shadows, the spectral forms of all the lives he had shattered. The man who had lived by collecting money, pain, and the broken pieces of others, died a pauper of the spirit, haunted by the very darkness he had unleashed. Victor was an earthquake in human form, a bully and a womanizer who saw the world as a stage for his aggression. He had never been challenged, not by his sycophantic friends who laughed at his cruelty, nor by the family who had long since learned to keep their distance. He was a man who lived by his fury and believed his invincibility was absolute. Lena had not seen the storm at first. She was drawn to a different side of him, a brief, deceptive calm before the chaos. The peace was shattered one day with a series of deafening threats. Words that promised pain and control. In that moment, her view of Victor shifted from a flawed man to a lethal threat. She knew she had to sever ties. And she had to do it in a way that would keep her alive. A plan formed in Lena's mind. A methodical blueprint for survival. She waited 2 weeks, a blur of silent anxiety and sleepless nights, until she was able to lawfully purchase a firearm. She placed his possessions outside her car, more than 10 feet away, a buffer of space between them. She was a woman of precise angles and safe distances now. When he arrived, she motioned for him to retrieve his belongings. But Victor, blinded by his own sense of untouchable power, kept advancing. He reached into the cracked window to grab her. Fear, cold and absolute, seized Lena. In a flash of self-preservation, she closed her eyes, pointed the small handgun, and pulled the trigger. The invincible man was undone, not by a warrior, but by a frightened woman who was finally pushed to her limit. He lived by his aggression, and in the end, he died by it. Cale was a man of steel, a retired military veteran who had traded battlefields for a quiet life of dealing arms. His home was a museum of his life's work. Gleaming swords, meticulously cared for firearms, trophies overflowing with awards for marksmanship. But his war wasn't over. It had merely traded the field for his mind. His PTSD was a ghost in the machine, a silent guardian that kept him on edge. A trigger waiting to be pulled. The most innocent of touches, the most mundane of physical contacts, could trigger the storm within. This was the one weak spot in his armor, the fatal flaw in the warrior's psyche. One afternoon, the fragile peace was shattered at a simple soccer game. Cale bumped into another parent. A shoulder-to-shoulder collision in a crowd. A simple, meaningless accident. But Cale's body reacted before his mind could. He pushed the man away, a look of pure, unadulterated rage on his face. Cale, sensing the danger, walked away, a rare act of de-escalation. But the other man wasn't done. He pulled a gun, a cold, metallic object that Cale himself dealt in, and without a word, he shot Cale 16 times. The seasoned warrior, a man who had survived countless armed conflicts, fell in a hail of gunfire at a children's soccer game. He lived by the gun, and in the end, it was the gun, and the fear it instilled in others, that killed him.